Our next speaker is Boris Popov, who's founder of BRS Aerospace. Boris was born in Munich, Germany, and immigrated to the US in 1949 through Ellis Island. He graduated from the University of Minnesota with a bachelor's in economics, minored in aeronautical engineering in IT. He's rated as a private pilot, sailplane, hang gliding, floatplane, and FAA Ground Instructor. He founded BRS in 1981 and is currently Director and Senior VP of Sales. I'm going to let him tell you how many lives BRS has saved to date, but he is the recipient of numerous awards. He's going to talk today about the challenge of integrating ballistic parachutes in eVTOL flight. Boris.
Thank you, Ivanka, again for inviting me to speak at this prestigious event. It's been 3 or 4 years, right, in a row, and it's always a pleasure. I don't want to upstage Josh on his 36-hour flight here, but 24 hours ago, I was in a small island in a small bay in the middle of Alaska. I stepped out of my lodge door, and there was a brown bear facing me. After a change of underwear, I got on a flight and got here. So I didn't want to upstage you, Josh, but just want you to know that. One of the things about this presentation that I do every time is that I want you to understand it's a bit melodramatic. There's a lot of really good videos. It tends to sometimes have a negative tone because it's crashes and people being saved, but it's important for you all to understand the capabilities of the BRS system. One of the most common questions I get asked is how low will it work, how fast will it work, these kind of things. So I want to caveat that this presentation is oriented towards eVTOL flight, but it has a lot of melodrama associated with it, but I think you'll enjoy that. So as Ivanka said, I started BRS in 1981. We got our first STC and a Cessna 150 in 1993. As you all know, Cirrus then came on board with their SR-20 line, which has a standard equipment parachute. And Cirrus really helped us to validate the concept, the acceptance of the ballistic parachute for aircraft. Cirrus's accident rate now is 1/2, fatal accident rate per 100,000 hours is 1/2 of the GA fleet. Think about that. That's a substantial change from the early days of Cirrus when their accident rate per 100,000 hours was considerably worse than that. But through training, through teaching the pilots and the owners of the airplane the capabilities of the BRS that was installed, their accident rate now is 1/2 of GA. So let me start this presentation with the cover shot here is a heavily redacted as a request of the developers of the aircraft. But that shows you a typical VTOL deployment, static ground. It's called what we call a ground extraction test, GET. We have to do that for every aircraft that we design a parachute for. We have to do at least 1 or 2 ground extraction tests. Thank goodness no longer does the FAA require us to take an airplane in the air like the 150 we had to do and do a multiple series of in-air tests. We don't need to do that anymore because the FAA understands that once a parachute gets deployed, it's just a parachute. There's nothing exotic about it. It simply has to fill with air and deploy. So we do these kind of ground extraction tests, as you can see here. Very straightforward, very quick. We get into a whole different issues I'll talk about later about VTOL deployments, but this is a good static presentation of what happens on the ground. So as we said, I started the company in 1981. The beginning years, we used all kinds of crazy stuff, compressed air, drogue guns, springs, you name it. I mean, I wish I had videos that it'd get an award for comedy. The place we were at, the little shop that I had, we tested a drogue gun one day, and next door to us was a grocery store. And we fired one of our drogue guns. It went through the sheetrock wall and disappeared. I got a knock on my door. My grocery store owner says, "Boris, come here." Takes me across over to his grocery store, and laying in the meat sausage department was one of our rocket motors. He said, "You gotta quit doing this next to me. You're scaring away my customers." So you can imagine the years of development and doing the prototype testing and the testing on the Cessna 172s and 182s and, of course, the Cirrus. There's a lot of exciting stuff that I could share with you sometime. So at this point, there's 35,000 plus systems installed worldwide. We have 386. We just had a third, three more saves in a Cirrus aircraft here last week. One of the most startling statistics to me about safety and BRS is that next line. When I did this number in my head, I thought I had my decimal point wrong. But you do the math, and after 36 years of being in business and some 35,000 systems on the market and 386 lives saved, it's about 1 out of 120 that we sell gets deployed. I want you all to think about that. You put 120 pilots in a room and tell them that one of you is going to need a parachute and deploy it. Some may argue that this is because the kind of people that buy parachutes need parachutes, which is nonsense. This is a cross-section of certified airplanes, ultralights, home-builts, experimentals, hang gliders, you name it. F-16 pilot that was flying a recreational flight in a Cirrus SR-20 in Louisiana. The whole statistical spectrum of capabilities of both pilot and aircraft is enumerated in that number. 1 out of 120 that we sell gets deployed. Highly impactful numbers when it comes to analyzing aviation safety. The market base, as I mentioned before, sport aviation, certified aircraft, military trainers. We've done some work for a lot of governments around the world for the military trainers. They're looking at ejection seats versus bringing down a whole airplane. Our argument always has been, you eject 2 people out of a trainer aircraft, and then you got a 5,000-pound bomb flying through the neighborhood. Why not just bring everybody down gently and walk away? And that's swinging over some people to our concept. We do spin recovery chutes, VTOL, as we talked, and suborbital launch vehicles. This is an old photo of a 1917 installation of a parachute on an airplane. BRS did not invent putting parachutes on airplanes. That was done in 1917. The trouble was, you can see the 50-gallon drum full of parachute material to fit into a small airplane is pretty much untenable. What we did at BRS is that we made a very lightweight, very small, ballistically deployed parachute with a smart parachute concept that senses airspeed. That's what BRS did, and that's what we got our patent for. But again, I don't want to take credit for being the one who put parachutes on airplanes. That was done a lot more innovative and risk takers back in the 1917s. Aircraft base, we've done numerous aircraft. I'm not going to go through all this, but basically you can see that our expansive network of customer base and experience base is worldwide and growing quite rapidly. As I mentioned about Cirrus's accident rate, this is really an important chart because I want you all to understand that putting a parachute on an airplane makes a difference, period. And I don't mean just in safety, I mean in economic sense. Cirrus has validated the fact that they became the #1 seller of single-engine airplanes in the world really quickly. And if I could only share with you the arguments I've had in front of some of the key players in this industry as far as their resistance to putting parachutes on airplanes. You can't argue with the facts. Cirrus became the #1 seller. They're the only GA airplane that offers it as standard equipment. Others who have as good an airplane, if not better than Cirrus, has offered it as standard, as non-standard, as an option, have not succeeded. I can't tell you exactly why, but for some reason, Cirrus generated an image of safety consciousness, and people gravitated towards that. And now Cirrus has 7,800 airplanes on the market, #1 in the world. But their accident rate, the fatality per 100,000 hours, was pretty miserable at first. And as I mentioned in my introduction, it's basically because Cirrus did not educate their buying public, the people buying these airplanes and the pilots flying them, as to the capabilities of that parachute that's on board. And once they train these people to say, look, this is a low altitude, low airspeed, high airspeed parachute, use the damn thing. Because people were going in thinking that they needed 2,000 feet, they needed certain kind of minimum airspeed or maximum airspeed. Once they said, no, when you're in trouble, and this is your last option, deploy the parachute. And once people start doing that, now they have 70, 77 deployments in Cirrus aircraft over the years. And our accident rate has dropped down almost to that corporate business level of flight, which is pretty outstanding. A good depiction of the components of a parachute. Again, I won't spend a lot of time, but for those that are interested, you can see that you have basically a canopy, suspension lines, you have the deployment bag, you have the rocket motor that deploys the entire, starts the entire sequence of deployment. The amazing thing to a lot of people who aren't familiar with the product is it is beginning to interact with your airplane within less than a second. Under a second, that parachute is already beginning to benefit the flight of that airplane. In other words, it's creating so much parasitic drag just coming out that you're pitching the nose up, which if you impact at that point, that's better than landing nose first, right? At least you're landing in the gear down situation. Two typical installations. One is a soft pack on the left. One is a canister system on the right. No difference in function other than the one on the left is like for a Cirrus airplane where it's integrated into the fuselage. The other one is an aftermarket installation. Both are sealed, environmentally sealed, and have a repack of 10 to 12 years. Electronic activation. As we get into VTOL flight, it's becoming a fascinating issue to me because we need to activate that parachute really quickly when you're talking about low altitude, low airspeed flight. Why is it today that the state-of-the-art jet fighters still have a mechanical handle between their legs? You know damn well that the manufacturers of fighter aircraft in the world can do autonomous ejections for ejection seats. Why do they still have to reach down and physically pull a handle? And I don't have an answer for that, other than the fact that I can assume it's because the manufacturers of the seats, and we at BRS, we still want the pilot to make that ultimate decision. Now that's going to change with eVTOL flight. There's no question about it. Because eVTOL flight, the V in VTOL means vertical, and parachutes hate that zone between 50 and 150 feet. I can give you a parachute that'll probably work at 150 feet with any kind of airspeed. You can probably survive without a parachute under 50 feet, but that what we call that coffin corner or that dead man zone, that's the danger area, and that requires electronic algorithms. You have to write software. You have to make a lot of complicated decisions, and when should that parachute be deployed? And it's not a simple thing to do, because there's a lot of situations where the sensors might think you're about to crash when you're really just flying along the side of a cliff or a mountainside. So there's a lot of issues with autonomous flight, but ultimately we're going to have to go to that sort of a realm of deployment, especially in VTOL flight. Another depiction of the standard deployment. This is off of our test during the Cirrus SR-20. You can see the parachute, the pack parachute, airframe, container cover. That's just the cover that is part of the fuselage in this case. The harness for the rocket motor, and then, of course, the rocket motor itself. The rocket motor is a solid fuel rocket motor. And I'll show you a little bit later that's not armed. It is not an armed system. That's really important to stress that. This is not a system that you can drop, it's going to go off. This is a system that has to be armed as you're beginning to pull the activation handle. Let's see, can you run that?
3, 2, 1.
That's a good video. That's one of the first SR-20 deployments we made.
3, 2, 1.
You can watch how fast that chute comes out. I mean, it literally is interacting within a second.
Looking good here, I got that. Very good, Stuart. Excellent. 3.
This is the famous Hawaii deployment that was filmed by a Coast Guard helicopter. Most of you have heard about that. He was flying a ferry flight from California to Hawaii, and because of a $4 fuel transfer valve, he couldn't get enough fuel transferred. He radioed the Coast Guard and said he's going to deploy a chute. They told him, vectored him over to a cruise ship. He flew over to the cruise ship, right next to it, pulled the handle. The cruise ship captain said, you cannot all go to one side of the ship, so most of them couldn't see it. He landed in the water, barely got his feet wet. And you can see the impact on the water, which is the worst case scenario for ballistic parachute deployment. You want the gear to be absorbing some impact. The water is the worst case scenario. On the left is a air show. This is a 22-year-old aerobatic pilot. Lost a wing in a sport aircraft. I mean, there was no way he was going to survive that. That wing was gone. It left the neighborhood from negative G loading. But he landed in the field. Now, that's not the normal landing configuration. He didn't mount it correctly, but he still was able to walk away. Now, here's one that I can't tell you who it was, where it was, or what airplane, because I promised not to. But some of you have probably seen this. It went viral on Facebook. A guy was doing some spin testing, and this guy's got 20-some thousand hours of flight testing. A very experienced test pilot. Got into a spin, did all the right things to try and come out of that spin. You can see him reach for the handle, and he says, no, I'm going to get out of this. He keeps trying everything he can do, reaches for the handle, and I'm a test pilot. I can get out of this. I don't need a parachute. Now he looks at his altimeter and goes, whoa, I'm getting really close to the ground. You'll see him reach over, pull the handle, chute comes out. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds. Boom, he's on the ground. So he was really lucky that he did. I mean, he was unlucky that he waited so long. Lucky that he finally decided, I'm not getting out of it. The only injury he had was right here when the canopy came down and hit him in the head. But that's a small price to pay, right? This is, I believe, the NASA Perseus program that we developed. Zach, can you run that? One of the first really autonomous aircraft that NASA worked on, this is probably 20-some years ago, they asked us for a parachute, not to save the airplane, but to save the avionics, because the avionics was worth a lot more than that aircraft was. So we got this video from them, and this is taken from 60,000 feet or something, 40 to 60,000. Watch the wings. Watch what happens here. You talk about flutter. I would classify that as a structural failure, wouldn't you guys? I mean, they lost everything, tail, wings, everything. The only thing left was the part of the fuselage where the avionics was on board, and they were extremely happy with us because we saved millions of dollars worth of avionics. Now, we talked about military trainers. This is a Indian Air Force HAL aircraft that we developed a parachute for in lieu of ejection seats. And this is a standard drop test that we had to do a little bit of slow motion, but this shows you the angle of descent, which is minus 10 degrees, nose impact, main gear impact, tail slap down, and that's it. That's your standard descent rate that you can expect to see under a standard BRS canopy, which is about 25 to 28 feet per second. But that's a real variable number because it depends on your aircraft. This is a view from the wingtip camera. can see how much impact the gear takes, and gear issues with BRS are very critical. This is Rami, and they named these two anthropomorphic dummies. I don't know why they did that, but they named them. They didn't fasten their shoulder harnesses down for some reason. So it took a bit of a jolt, but that's what you see at 25 to 28 feet per second. One of the fun stuff of being in my business is the early days of testing. This is the first in-air test of a BRS on an Eagle ultralight. How many of you in here remember the Eagle ultralight? Anybody? Of course you do, Tom. You're the only one. So we did this test over an air park in St. Paul, Minnesota. What we didn't know, he was supposed to cut away. What we didn't know is that the bridle of the parachute had ripped the sail, so the pilot could not cut away. Only he knew that, so he decided he was going to ride it down. Unfortunately, 30,000 volt power lines. Rob Kells is his name, who's no longer with us, but he was a brave soul, a great pilot, and he got out and walked around with his sandals on, putting out the fire with his sandals. A police officer came by and said, "You want to tell me what's going on here?" And Rob said, "I was flying my ultralight from California to New York, and I lost power, and I had to come down." Well, yeah. What else are you going to tell it? Because what we did was probably highly illegal. The rate of descent is an issue that a lot of people, I'm not going to dwell a lot on this, I'm going to run out of time here, but basically that's one of the more common questions asked me is, what's your rate of descent? And it's based on 5,000 foot density altitude. A lot of discussions about the best angle of descent. Should you hit nose first? Should you hit tail first? Should you hit on your gear? It just depends on your aircraft structure, but basically the more you can give us at BRS of structural landing mitigation shock. And if you can give us strong gear, if you can give us pads under your seat like Cirrus does, if you can give us a flat landing, high G-load seats, I can give you a smaller parachute. If I give you a smaller parachute, it's going to cost you less, it's going to weigh less, and you can come down faster. But typically, 25 to 30, Cirrus comes down at about 31 feet per second. But they've done some mitigation with the seats, seat pads and things like that take up the spinal loading. The FAA basically told us no more than 1,500 pounds of spinal loading is acceptable. We have no idea where they got that number. Nobody to this day knows where it came from, but that's what we aim for. We have dummies that measure the spinal loading, and so all your descent rates are based on that one thing. No more than 1,500 pounds of spinal loading is acceptable, otherwise you're going to get serious injuries. Oh, this is a fun one. This is a guy in Gap in France flying I believe a European ultralight, and took off on a beautiful day. This was on CNN.
It was a beautiful day for flying. Ernst Kuhn of Neuss, Germany, was piloting his small two-seater 1,000 feet above some idyllic French countryside near the town of Gap. In an instant, it became a pilot's worst nightmare.
Hit the tow cable.
He saw an airplane climbing right toward him.
So what I did, pull a little bit. Then when you see the video, something happened. I believe it was a rope in my propeller.
It sure was. He was ensnared in a cable used by a plane towing a glider. He was dropping like a stone. So what did he do?
The first I did was switch off the engine. And immediately afterwards, pull the parachute.
A parachute not just for him, but for his whole plane. He wafted into an orchard and walked away without a scratch.
I can't understand how it was so, but it was so. It was a moment that I think...
The vineyard owner came running over, and the pilot thought he was about to get his ass chewed really hard for destroying a bunch of vines and vineyard structure. He came running over, reached into the cockpit and gave him a glass of cognac and said, "I think you're going to need this, buddy." So he's a real happy guy. This is the montage of some of our latest saves. James Meadows in the top left-hand corner. He's the only guy that ever sends us pizza and beer on an anniversary of a save. The Grahams, they were flying a Cirrus SR-22 in California. They went up into marginal VFR or into some cloud cover. for some reason, the autopilot inverted the aircraft, and he's an aerobatic instructor, so he knows how to fly that airplane. He said, no, I'm getting out of this, pulled the parachute. They came down and they landed in a small walnut tree, and they had crystal glasses that they bought at an auction in the back seat and didn't even break the glasses, so they're very happy, but she won't fly anymore with them. On the right is a gentleman taking his daughter to tour some colleges in the East Coast, some highly expensive Ivy League colleges, and they deployed, lost the engine, they deployed. Rumor is she's going to a community college now, but Mr. Volk and his grandson in bottom left, they were flying in the British Columbia Mountains, Rocky Mountains. They lost control of the airplane. Never did understand, would he even tell anybody why, but he lost control of the airplane, landed in a scree slope of a Rocky Mountain, walked away, called a helicopter. Helicopter actually grabbed the straps of the bridle of the parachute and lifted him off the mountain, put him over at an airport, put a new prop on, fixed the gear, and flew away. Bottom right-hand corner is Dick McLaughlin and his daughter. They were flying on Cirrus to Haiti for a mission, rescue mission, not a rescue mission, but an aid mission. Halfway across the Bahamas, they lost their engine, landed in the water, swam to the little one-man, two-man raft, and the last thing they saw, somewhere in the Bahamas, there's a SR-22 still being pulled, because they said the last thing they saw was over the horizon, the parachute pulling the airplane. Nobody knows where it is. This is James Meadows. This is a really emotional clip that I like to show because it shows you the emotional impact of when you realize your life has been saved.
To my dear friends at BRS Systems, this is James Meadows, and I am standing at W22, Buchanan, West Virginia. This is January the 3rd, 2016. And 2 years ago tomorrow, not very far away from that threshold, I would have become a smoking pallet debris, leaving at the time a widow, a 3-week-old child, and a 3-year-old son, who would have never got to see the battle if it wasn't for your great creation. The days are hard and long, and things suck. Remember, you guys are changing the world, one life at a time, one parachute at a time, one airplane at a time, one engine out at a time. You guys are heroes. Stay strong. Thank you.
So we get bad days at the office. We like to play that to the employees and say, this is why you're doing what you're doing. Exactly this kind of a scenario. Electric propulsion. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to get into this. This is our challenge with VTOL flight right here. It's a real challenge. You can see the coffin corners there. We need either airspeed or we need height. We prefer both. And so the typical VTOL takeoff is going to be a problem. The typical VTOL landing is going to be a problem. However, we are in the process of some really proprietary chute development and deployment technologies that are going to allow us to mitigate that dead man's corner there. We can, we think, with some of this technology we've got, give you a parachute that's going to function between 50 and 150 feet. Above 150, a standard parachute, not a standard parachute, but a special low-altitude parachute will probably work. Under 50 feet, you probably don't need a parachute. You can probably survive it. But that's the flight parameters that we like to see is give me airspeed or give me altitude. People ask me what's the lowest deployment you've ever had. What's the lowest altitude you can deploy it? Well, that's a nonsensical question. Because if I'm flying at 200 knots at 50 feet above the ground, parallel with the ground, I can deploy a parachute and it'll open before I crash, right? You've got a lot of forward airspeed, the parachute's going to open quickly and before I hit the ground. I can't, if you're doing 200 knots in a vertical dive, obviously it's not going to work in time. So it's a matter of time, it's not a matter of altitude. And that to me exemplifies our challenge at VTOL flight, is how are we going to take care of those red zones, and I think we've got a solution for that employs rocket and a special parachute. But it also has to work at high speed, high altitude, right? You can't just You can't just have a parachute that's going to work in the one scenario. It has to work in all scenarios, and that's the challenge. One of the other things that I'm working on is we get these VTOLs coming down in a schoolyard. You better start warning people on the ground that there's a aircraft coming down, either under a parachute or in an emergency descent. So I've involved with a new company that we formed. We have a patent on this concept. It's basically a laser projection device that's going to fit on VTOLs and on tail rotors of helicopters, main rotors of helicopters, any kind of pusher or tractor propellers. It's going to basically project. Can you run us that? So you can basically project, and we have a Aero Innovate booth next to the NASA booth. If you go out and take a look at it, we have a working prototype. You've got to warn people on the ground. When you start having thousands of these VTOLs flying around the countryside or in the cities, you got to warn people on the ground that there's something coming down. Everybody's noise conscious. You want to get them quiet? Fine, but you better be warning people that there's something about to land on you, especially in emergency situations under canopies. This is called EFX Corporation, and again, it's an Aero Innovate booth at the grounds of Oshkosh. Common questions. I'm going to skip over that. I'm sure you'll have some questions like that, but again, descent rate, largest aircraft that we've done and are working on aircraft up to 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight. That's a challenge. Remote deployment, we talked about that. Autonomous deployment, again, is an issue that we're working on as I talk with two gentlemen at the table. And we know that this is an issue we have to solve. We have to decide whether we're going to have an autonomous deployment or a pilot-activated deployment. In VTOL flight, you don't have much time. It's going to have to be autonomous at some point, because with low altitude that we're talking about, and descent and takeoff, you don't have time to decide, hey, I've got a problem, I better pull my handle, time's gone. It has to be an autonomous deployment. Okay, that's it. Thank you again, and if I'll take any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
Get my steps in.
Thanks. Excellent presentation. I seem to recall at one of the aero exhibitions in Friedrichshafen seeing, and it might have just been a mock-up of a vertical takeoff vehicle that had a ballistic parachute mounted above the rotor head. Have you done any of those experiments, or do you know of an actual deployment test with a configuration like that?
There has been, as far as I know, no in-air test of that concept, and I'll tell you why. First of all, people almost automatically think that's the best place to put a parachute on top of the rotor. That's the worst place you can put it, because if you understand how helicopter blades work, you're sucking air down, and you try to deploy that parachute, especially in a hover emergency, you're going to just suck that parachute right back down on the blades again. The place to put it on a gyrocopter or a helicopter is in the fuselage and point it away from the blades, let it rotate tail first, and then come down in a landing configuration. So as far as I know, no one's done it yet. We did work with the Army in the early 90s on their attack helicopter, EHX I think was their attack helicopter, the new one. They were going to put a ballistic parachute on that attack helicopter. We got a long way down the road with them. Then the test pilot said, no, we're not putting it on. We want ejection seats. So they put ejection seats to the sides. And of course our question was, what are you going to do if you're rotating that way? But it hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen. We have a solution for it. But there's a lot of people doing just prototype mounting without really thinking through the consequences of it. Good question.
Hi, Boris. I have a comment on a slide that you didn't show, you jumped, and the first phrase was something like, your reputation is built in the beginning, or something like that. And that reminded me, because I'm Brazilian, and in the 90s, an airline called TAM in Brazil bought a lot of Fokker 100 aircraft. Great aircraft, nothing special. And they had like 2 or 3 major accidents on that aircraft in Brazil. And the result was that Brazilians didn't want to fly Fokker 100 anymore. People were rejecting, not buying tickets, because they thought it was like the worst aircraft possible. So I think my comment, I praise Carl that said, yeah, let's look for Part 25 levels of safety, and I see the parachutes as an amazing idea to build this reputation of eVTOLs in the sense that we cannot get that wrong, because if we do, we're gonna kill a market pretty much. So that was my comment, and
No, exactly.
great job. Yeah.
Actually, that was my closing comment here, is that anybody here remember the 2020 show about ultralight flying? Yeah, Tom, you remember everything from the old days, don't you? Anyway, here's a 2020 show, a nationally broadcast TV show. The ultralight industry was burgeoning. I was a dealer then. I was selling 70 aircraft a year. Things were going great. 2020 came on. They showed a video of a reporter going up in an ultralight. The thing pitches up. He falls out to his death and tumbles, and it's all over the national news. My phone, I sold 3 airplanes the next year. The entire ultralight industry, I think, was primarily caused by that one damn TV show that was unfair, because the reporter was told just to go taxi, you're not supposed to fly, he didn't even put a seatbelt on. But that one TV show, the media loves drama, right? They love airplane crashes. You know that. Every damn time there's a plane crash, there's reporters all over the place. My warning to this industry is, I got my license in 1967. I've seen a couple of revolutions in aviation. We have to be really conscious of the fact that you want to really hurt this exciting new VTOL market. Let the media get a hold of it in a negative way. And the way they're going to get a hold of it in a negative way is if you have things crashing in neighborhoods or on freeways and causing car crashes. You got to have some kind of decelerator. You got to have something that in emergency situations, like pulling over to the side of a freeway. That's all a parachute is. I'm pulling over to the side to fix what's wrong. And I can't overstress that to you. And anyway, I thank you for the time. I'm sure I'm overrun a bit. Ivanka, thank you very much.